Satisfactory doesn't have tunnels, but I built one anyway. Actually, I built a lot more than that, and it's all been made possible by a bug and some very questionable blueprints. But what intrigued me the most wasn't the tunnels, oh no, they sparked a completely different idea. This is a subway station, part of my underground rail network. Yes, it's entirely underground. And this isn't just a visual trick, this train is fully functional underground, stations, signals, everything. So if this works, why isn't this a feature? Why can't we just dig tunnels in Satisfactory? The short answer is, the game was never built for it. Satisfactory's world is static, the terrain doesn't change, and is very much on purpose. Once you allow players to dig, everything else has to react to it. Suddenly the game has to recalculate collisions, update AI pathing, rebuild terrain data on the fly, and make sure players' vehicles and factories don't fall through the world. This isn't just a single system, it's every system. And even if that all worked, there's a much bigger issue to consider. Satisfactory's map is designed to push back against you. Some areas are flat and easy, but maybe poor in resources, others are incredibly rich but steep, hostile, and awkward to build in. This friction is intentional. If you could just tunnel straight to cliffs and mountains, that friction disappears. Logistics becomes trivial, terrain stops mattering. At that point, you're turning Satisfactory into a completely different game. So tunnels aren't missing, they're deliberately forbidden. So how did I actually do this then? Completely by accident. I was laying down some very questionable rails near a cliff when I noticed something strange. The train didn't collide with the rock, it went straight through, and then it clicked. Trains don't collide with terrain. And if the train can go inside the cliff and the player has no collision while riding it, that means I can go there too. But it was pretty difficult to make the train go completely inside, mainly because rails can be nudged. But once I packaged the rail into a blueprint, I could nudge it inside the cliff, slide in the train, and suddenly I was inside the cliff. This was a really cool moment for me. Now, to be clear, this isn't entirely accidental design. Games often allow for a small amount of mesh clipping on purpose, otherwise derailing your train every time it brushes with a rock gets really frustrating and nobody wants that. But combined with blueprints, that tiny allowance turns into a loophole big enough to drive a train through, literally. Inside the game world, you can start building just like you would in any other place. Just, you might have to build your own floor first, so make sure you bring a hoverback and a stable electrical connection. Once I knew this worked, the question wasn't can I do it anymore, it was how far can I push it. Quick heads up, if you enjoy smart Satisfactory builds, useful tips and the occasional thing that really shouldn't exist, you might want to subscribe. That's basically what this channel is about. And speaking of pushing things further, let me show you how I turned this into a proper tunnel system. Now, I could have just clipped the rail straight through a cliff with some floating supports, and functionally that would work just fine. But the moment you see the train enter a rock, or worse, ride it yourself, the illusion completely falls apart. And I wasn't having that. Doing this by hand would be madness, so I needed blueprints. The goal was simple: a tunnel segment that could be placed repeatedly, hides the terrain completely, and actually feels intentional. I built a tunnel around parallel rails, wrapped them in a half-pipe foundation to form a tube, sealed the top with platforms, and used signs for subtle lighting. Simple, modular, and easy to extend. One important detail: when placing these blueprints, autoconnect must be enabled. Even if the segments are perfectly aligned, skipping autoconnect will cause derailments between sections. With the straight tunnel done, all I needed was an entrance. I took the same segment, added a roll-up gate, placed a black wall behind it, and dressed the surrounding cliff as naturally as I could. The idea was to make it feel like the tunnel belongs there, not like something glitching through reality. With just these two blueprints, I could punch into a cliff, run straight through the mountain, and exit cleanly on the other side. And the result? Tunnels that feel like they were always meant to exist. But I wasn't done yet, because tunnels are cool, but I wanted to go deeper. To build a proper subway system, I first needed a way down. That part was easy, a sloped rail leading underground, finished with a bump stop, which is absolutely mandatory. Once the train starts rolling downhill, stopping it manually is optimistic. I also added a power connection at the bottom. Hoverpacks usually latch onto rails, but they're kind of unreliable. A power socket guarantees you don't fall into the void. Beyond straight tunnels, I also needed curves, and fitting those into the blueprint designer was a nightmare, to be honest. This single curved tunnel section took longer to build than the entire station. Every small mistake forced a full redesign. But once it worked, it allowed my rails to go anywhere. Unfortunately, the station itself was far too large for the blueprint designer, so this part had to be done manually. I leaned hard into realism here: escalators, underpasses, benches, signage, even large ventilation fans like you'd see above real subway tunnels. One of the ticket machines actually is a light switch. It controls the station's lighting. I had to keep it dim because underground fog makes bright lights look like this place is full of smoke. Because let's face it, you're not supposed to see this part of the world. this is probably the most illegal build I've done in Satisfactory, yet it somehow worked perfectly. I'm genuinely proud of how it turned out. I rarely do builds like this, I usually favor function over form, but I finally get why people love architectural projects. There was just one problem though, the entrance. Taking a train underground just to transfer to another train wasn't practical, so I needed another way in. Turns out, Hypertubes work underground too. I designed a small entrance blueprint with a hidden hypertube behind the door. That tube connects straight through the terrain and into the station below, giving you a seamless way in and out. At this point, you might be thinking, do you seriously expect me to build all of this just for a single station? No, absolutely not. So I simplified it. I realized I didn't need the entire station underground, just the functional core, 2 stations, and the hypertube access point. By modifying the tunnel blueprint to include those elements, I could stamp down fully functional underground station anywhere on the map. Drop a station segment, connect it to the entrance blueprint above, and I'd have a working subway station. That's all great for aesthetics, but this next use completely changes how useful this actually is. Because this isn't just about passengers anymore, it's about freight. You don't have to keep an entire train line underground, you can bury just the part that matters. For example, a freight station directly under a factory. Instead of weaving belts, lifts and rails through your build, you drop everything straight down into the underground station. Clean factory above, messy logistics hidden below. And the best part, getting trains underground doesn't have to be complicated. With just 2 slope tunnel segments, one going down and one poking the actual hole, a train can dip below the surface exactly where you need it to, and then return above ground like nothing happened. No massive underground networks, no permanent commitment. You get the cleanliness of underground rails with the flexibility of building everything else above ground. Best of both worlds. And with that, my subway system was complete. So, is this actually useful, or is it just a cool gimmick? Let's weigh in the pros and cons. First, it has cleaner layout. Moving rail infrastructure underground clears massive visual clutter and clears the top area for surface builds. Second, fixes logistics. If you've boxed yourself into a factory layout, like I definitely have, sending resources straight down instead of across can be a lifesaver. And yes, lifts can clip through terrain too. And finally, it looks and feels incredible. But what about the cons? Well, the entire system relies on a bug. Coffee Stain could patch it out anytime. Though, given their stance on player freedom, I doubt they ever will. It's also harder to build cleanly. Autoconnect doesn't extend foundations, so polish takes effort. That's something else you have to consider. And while building it, immersion is gone. You'll spend hours in the void and not really feeling like you're playing a game. The final verdict. Would I recommend this for your first rail line? Absolutely not. But for late game bases, mega factories, a world-spanning logistics network, it's incredible. If you've got the time, I genuinely think you should try it. If this convinced you that Satisfactory needs underground trains, make sure you're subscribed, because I'm just getting started.